What if literally everything you thought you knew about breathing was just completely wrong? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into an absolutely wild biological thought experiment. It's a scenario that radically redesigns the very physics of life as we know it. Normally we think of evolution as life crawling out of the water and treating that dense, low-oxygen ocean for the light, breezy air we breathe right now. But nature doesn't really have absolute rules, just physical constraints. So today, we're going to explore a brilliantly crafted, scientifically grounded look at a terrifying but amazing alternate evolutionary path for our own planet Earth. Okay, let's just dive right into it. What if Earth's atmosphere was a breathable liquid? Imagine a bizarre, thrilling scenario where our atmosphere isn't gas at all, but a massive, dense, global ocean of a transparent, supercritical fluid called hydrosol. Seriously, try to picture this with me for a second. You look up, and instead of a blue sky and fluffy clouds, you see this thick emerald haze wrapping the entire planet. There's no boundary between the ocean and the sky anymore. It's just one continuous blurry gradient. Every single living thing on this alternate Earth has to process a physically heavy liquid just to get enough oxygen to survive. It literally rewrites the biological rulebook from the ground up, giving us these entirely alien monsters and marvels. Moving right along to Section 1, a world of liquid air and the physics of the medium. To really understand how anything could survive here, we've got to pause and look at the terrifying physics of this thick, ambral environment. Hydrosol is incredibly unforgiving. I mean, you and I, we have it incredibly easy. Breathing takes almost zero effort for us, and we get a solid 210 milliliters of oxygen for every liter of air we inhale. But hydrosol? Imagine trying to breathe heavy honey or a thick syrup. It's a stubborn, weighty medium that's literally 800 times denser than our air. It's highly viscous. And the real kicker, it holds significantly less oxygen per unit volume, even when it's fully saturated under extreme atmospheric pressure. Because pushing all that heavy fluid back and forth costs way more oxygen than it actually gives you, the very first rule of this world is that tidal breathing, the way humans inhale and exhale out of the same pipe, is absolutely dead. If you or I suddenly teleported into this liquid atmosphere and tried to take a normal breath, the sheer mechanical force needed to pull that dense fluid in, stop it, and push it back out, it would burn far more oxygen than we'd ever get from the breath itself. Basically, human lungs would literally exhaust themselves to death after a single agonizing breath. Life here simply cannot afford to stop and reverse momentum. The flow has to be in one continuous direction. Which brings us to Section 2, Anatomy of a Liquid Breather. Enter the Vesper Hound. Let's set the scene a bit. Picture a sleek, hydrofoil-shaped herbivore, let's call it a spire gazelle, grazing on the plains. It's completely unaware that an apex predator, the warm-blooded Vesper Hound, is lurking in the shadows, preparing to strike. While the hound is waiting, let's take a peek inside its body to see how it actually breathes. Instead of inhaling and exhaling, fluid just flows continuously. First, twin nasal siphons suck the fluid in, heavily filtering out any suspended debris. Second, since there's no diaphragm to pull air down, a pharyngeal pump made of intensely strong throat muscles literally swallows the fluid backwards. Third, it hits the lamellar cavity. Now, normal balloon-like lungs would instantly collapse under the sheer weight of this fluid, right? So these lungs are rigid, radiator-like vaults lined with thousands of ultra-thin plates. And finally, the oxygen-depleted fluid is continuously blasted out through exhaust spiracles, these adjustable vents on the ribcage that actually give the animal a jet propulsion boost. How wild is that? Now get this, by using countercurrent blood flow and a crazy violet emerald-colored hyperhemocyanin molecule, the hound extracts a staggering 90% of the oxygen from the fluid. Compare that to a human's measly 25%. If you were to look at this creature's blood, it would be this brilliant alien violet-green color. Because the thick fluid medium is so incredibly stingy with its dissolved oxygen, this hyperhemocyanin acts like a supercharged copper-iron hybrid, carrying 3 times the oxygen volume of our red blood cells. It basically strips every single possible molecule of oxygen out of the hydrosol with brutal, absolute efficiency. All right, Section 3, the physics of the hunt. Thermodynamics in the hydrosol. Okay, let's unpause our scene. The chase is on. The hound violently kicks out its webbed limbs, and it's not really sprinting, it's effectively flying low through this thick air right at the gazelle. Now the hound's muscles are burning at a hot 38 degrees Celsius, but the liquid atmosphere acts as a massive 15-degree heat sink, which means it's constantly threatening the animal with instant hypothermia. Think about jumping into a freezing cold swimming pool. Water conducts heat roughly 24 times faster than air does. So a high-speed pursuit in this dense medium generates a ton of thermal energy, but they can't afford to sweat to cool down. Their whole heat problem is totally inverted. They're fighting an exhausting battle just to not lose their core heat to the frigid fluid that's constantly rushing straight through the middle of their massive lungs. It's kind of terrifying when you think about it, being hunted by an apex predator that literally has to eat you just to keep its own blood from freezing solid. So, how do they survive this massive thermal drain? Well, these animals evolved vascular heat exchangers and highly hydrophobic, or water-repelling, skin to aggressively trap their body heat, along with a massively supercharged metabolic rate. Before warm blood ever reaches those internal lungs, a vascular blanket of dense blood vessels transfers the core heat right back into the body. That keeps the lungs themselves cold and close to the ambient temperature, preventing massive heat loss to the passing fluid. Couple that with a sleek, waxy blubber layer, and you've got an animal that's constantly burning 5 times the calories of a normal earth mammal just to stay warm. Every single plant and animal in this food web is locked in a brutal arms race of calories, basically walking around as dense packages of oily, high-energy fuel for whoever manages to eat them next. And as the hound burns all that energy during the chase, it hits another absolutely bizarre biological hurdle. To avoid a fatal acid buildup in its blood, it uses oversized kidneys to rapidly dump protons. Yes, that means it is in a state of constant, controlled urination. I know it sounds a bit ridiculous, but the chemistry here is incredibly serious. When you clear carbon dioxide into a liquid environment, it quickly forms carbonic acid, which would turn the animal's blood highly acidic in a matter of seconds. So to survive this respiratory acidosis, the hound relies on a hyperrenal system that literally takes up a full third of its entire abdomen, frantically pumping acid out of its body into a continuous stream of dilute urine while it runs. Let's zoom out to Section 4, Flora of the Emerald Forest, and look at the botanical scaffolding. Let's actually take a look at the environment they are racing through. Imagine a glowing, buoyant cathedral of alien plant life. Since gravity is partially offset by the thick fluid, giant kelp oaks don't need rigid woody trunks like the trees in our backyards. Instead, they literally float upward on internal methane balloons, anchored deep down by massive root holdfasts. And because the thick fluid can easily become stagnant and suffocate the plants, they actually possess literal muscles. They use them to gently wave their own ribbon-like fronds back and forth to absorb carbon dioxide. Walking through this forest would feel like exploring a towering, bioluminescent underwater kelp forest, complete with a drifting snow of glowing, actively swimming reproductive spores filling the heavy air all around you. Moving over to Section 5, Sensory Landscapes, Perceiving a Fluid World. As the desperate gazelle executes a sharp, banking turn using its own exhaust jets to try and break away, this chase turns into a battle of wildly alien senses. Up here, the sensory hierarchy is totally flipped. Vision, which is obviously our dominant human sense, is practically useless past 50 meters in this murky, light-scattering fluid. But acoustics? Because fluids are nearly incompressible, sound absolutely rips through this environment at an incredible 1,500 meters per second. The animals don't even have open ears. They use dense, internalized hydrophones embedded directly in their skulls to hear. And smells? They don't scatter in chaotic, turbulent winds like they do on Earth. Thanks to the thick, laminar flow of the fluid, scents hang in the dense air like perfectly straight, highly predictable ribbons that a predator can track for kilometers. And as if that weren't enough of an advantage, the hound can also detect the exact micro-pressure waves of the fleeing gazelle using its lateral line. This lets it steer perfectly toward its prey, even in pitch-black darkness. It's detecting near-field water displacement. Think about standing near a highway and feeling the sudden rush of wind from a passing car. Now amplify that sensitivity by 1,000. Every single step the gazelle takes violently pushes fluid aside. The hound's flanks are lined with hundreds of mechanoreceptors that feel this pressure, instantly building a real-time 3-dimensional tactile map of exactly where the prey is moving. Honestly, it's a completely unparalleled evolutionary masterpiece. Finally, Section 6. How did this happen? The evolutionary crossroads. So the hunt is successful, and the exhausted hound is pulsing its throat pump in the quiet, floating woods, which really makes us wonder, how on earth did this bizarre biosphere evolve from a planet like ours? Well, the geological record of this alternate Earth points to a massive divergence during the late Permian period. A catastrophic volcanic event in the Siberian traps spewed halocarbons into the sky for millions of years. And slowly, the sky literally got heavier and heavier. As these heavy gases got trapped by gravity, atmospheric pressure skyrocketed to 15 bars, eventually condensing the sky itself into a supercritical fluid mist, and then finally, a crushing global liquid ocean. The creatures with primitive tidal lungs, they just drowned as the sky fell on them. But the small, amphibious ancestors with flow-through throat pumps and lateral lines, they survived the bottleneck, carrying the torch of evolution into a completely redesigned, terrifying new world. It all leaves us with this profound idea, a world that does not inhale the sky, but flows within it. This liquid atmosphere concept leaves us with a really haunting thought about life's sheer, unstoppable adaptability. It proves that the boundaries of biology are vastly, incomprehensibly wider than the narrow slice of life we see right outside our own windows.
Please like and subscribe.